All right, so the question is, you're starting to say, all right, so if this order of creation really does apply out there in the world, and it's in force, this has implications, and you bet it does. And you're starting to play through some of these. You're starting to wonder about this. All right, before we get into all the kind of particular what about questions, I want to say something else to kind of keep some perspective on this. While this is true, and this is God's will and God's law for the world, and it should be enforced, the fact is we're living in a world that is broken and is living in violation of God's purposes all the time. And we know that. And so we have to face the uncomfortable reality that we live in a world that is living toward peace and is often out of kilter with God's law, grievously so. Just look at our laws regarding abortion and homosexuality and all kinds of other immorality. We see it really out of step. And so it often is not working the way it should. So we have to sometimes find ourselves in kind of uncomfortable positions in the world. For example, if I'm a legislator and I think abortion is wrong, maybe the best I can do is to get a law passed for parental notification, or, stopping late-term abortions. I haven't stopped them all, and somebody might say, well, what you did is worthless because it's still happening. But you see, you're doing what you can. You're working against it. You're doing what you can in the context of the world you live in. And this is one of the kind of things that people don't like about the left-hand realm. When a Christian goes into the left-hand realm and starts to try to do stuff, you get dirty. It's messy over here. And you get polluted. Not just dirty, because of like hard work dirty, just nasty dirty. And you end up getting fouled by the world. It's not a pleasant place out here. And you end up making sometimes rather unholy alliances, and you're working at compromise. And that's the nature of the game in politics, compromise. And if you're trying to work toward the right direction, sometimes you're making compromises, and people often will be very critical of you. It's not a pleasant experience doing this, which is why people try to stay away from it. And somebody asked me during the break, traditionally, it seems like a lot of LCMS pastors have gotten the pulpit and won't touch politics. Like that's, forbidden. And I think one of the reasons they've done that is not because this demands it. It becomes because of an improper understanding of this. It comes because we think Jefferson was right. But it also comes because you start getting into politics and it's just messy. It's not neat and clean like theology. Theology is much cleaner. And, just boom, boom. But out here, things just get messy. And that's the reality. Now, having said that, we're living in a world where things aren't always working the way they should. I believe we need to always remember what the standard is. We as God's people need to remember what is God's best and be always keeping that ideal in our mind and working toward it. And so I envision a society where abortion is illegal and where people don't get to live together outside of marriage because it's not allowed and they're discouraged from that. I still have the ideal in my mind of a society where divorce is seen as a really bad thing, and so it's discouraged like crazy. We don't just kind of get used to it. And you go on with the list. This is how it should be, and this is the ideal. We strive for this. And I have an ideal. I believe it would be an awesome thing if our society took seriously the order of creation, and men were men, and women were women, and men took care of the women, and it was happening the way it should. I think that would be awesome for our society, because I believe that's how God wired it to be. I think it would be a good thing for society. Now, my vision for the world is that diametrically opposite of what a lot of people in the world think it should be. Because they want exactly the opposite. They want radical egalitarianism. They want women to do everything. And then some even want women in charge of everything. So that would be better than the men messing it up. And so, you see, my vision of the world is really at odds with it. But I still believe that's God's best. And I hold on to that and I work for it. But when I go out in the world, I realize I can't kind of live in my ideal dream world. I've got to face the facts of a real world. So if I have a woman who is a boss in my company, do I say, wow, you're violating God's will. You've got to quit? Probably not. Do I realize, because of my understanding of the natural law, the way things are ordered, maybe I'm more tuned into some of the dynamics and some of the things that are probably going to be going on there, and maybe I get a little more insight into what's happening, and maybe why she does some of the things she does and why I feel the way I do when she does some of those. I have maybe a better idea, because you see, I recognize this is just kind of wired into it. It's the way it is. Now, do I have to quit my job because she's a woman boss? I don't say you have to, but you might decide this is intolerable. You might get to that point. I don't know. But see, I'm not ready to start kind of handing out rules and saying, you got to do this, you got to do this. Now, having said that also, suppose I am a Christian woman and I have the opportunity to take a position of leadership. Should I do it? Oh, that's a tough one. You got to kind of sort it out. And you got to say, am I going to be putting myself in a position where I'm going to be undermining the order of creation? And if you would say, I think I would be, maybe you should think twice about it. Or if you could say, I think by doing this, I can serve well, still meet my responsibilities to my family, which is a huge issue. I'll get onto that again a little bit later here, if I have time. Still meet my responsibilities, my vocational responsibilities, and maybe even set an example of how I can be in a submissive kind of role even as I'm doing this. And if you can do that, I would say there's nothing wrong with it. But see, it's not like just, you can't do that. I'm not ready to kind of just give blanket rules. The president thing, a little stronger on that, because I don't think there's any way possible for a woman to be president and still maintain that, look, you see, I'm in submission. I just can't see it happening. So I would have a concern with that. So in other words, would I encourage my daughter to run for president? No. Okay,
but the rulers and the authorities are...
If the woman happens to be the president, do I run off to Canada? No, not necessarily. They got their problems there too. But would I say this is the best? No. But can God use her? Sure. Did God use Margaret Thatcher? Yeah. Was Margaret Thatcher a great leader? Sure. But was it the best? I don't think so. She was great. Yeah, but see, she was a woman. I don't think it was the best. But we have all kinds of not the best, and we deal with it. Now, am I saying she was bad or sinning by doing that? I'm not saying that. But I'm saying I think the ideal is there, and we need to pay attention to it. Okay?
So I just can't get away that you want Sharia law, but Christian style.
Not exactly. Not exactly.
Muslim countries that really have this. I mean, my mom lives in Oman. You are not allowed to buy pork. There's a big sign, no Muslims allowed in this part of the store.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I mean, is that what you really want?
Not necessarily, but I do think, you know, and I'm not saying every bit of life has to be, you know, dictated to, but I do believe that, you know, would it be wrong to have a law that says living outside of marriage, you know, is wrong? And I don't think that'd be wrong. I mean, there's some moral things. And you see, the kind of question is it worth making a law over it? And that's what we have to kind of decide. You know, is it worth making a law? Everybody has to go to church on Sunday. Well, probably not. You know, see, the blue laws grew out of that. You know, we're trying to enforce the Sabbath. You know, no stores open, so you stay home. And so we aren't that far away, and I'm not sure it's the same as Sharia law. It's more like this is just what's right. We want to make laws that are in accord with what's right. And so it's not so much maybe trying to mandate behavior as it is we want to be tuned into what God's purposes are. That is the ultimate law. But see, this whole premise of natural law is just not a good idea out there in the world because the implications are way too strong. Okay? Now, so any questions on that then? Because I ended dramatically, but I think you get the idea here. I'm not making a hard and fast rules, but I am saying I believe this is the standard, and I believe it is God's best, and I believe it does absolutely apply there in the world. And does that make for some uncomfortable situations? It might. And does that mean that you decide sometimes, maybe I won't put myself in that position? It might. And I have had conversations with more than one woman who come to me and say, hey, what about this? I'm feeling uncomfortable here. I say, I think you should feel uncomfortable. You probably shouldn't be doing it. You know, but you've got to kind of sort out each situation. Yeah?
I find Christians more likely to go to the right-hand side simply because it's more comfortable there.
Sure.
Because when you go to the left-hand side, it means you have to get dirty. You have to do it.
That's right. That's right.
You need work.
That's right.
Make it happen.
That's right.
And they don't want to go the other side.
No, I agree. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
You're going to say when you're going to be open to general questions? This is just on this topic your questions on.
I'll get to general questions. I'm hoping to give you some time at the end. Yeah. And maybe I'll ask you, maybe not. All right. All right. Take a look at Grudem's chart. He's got 5 columns. The center column is the complementarian middle. This is his understanding of, I've got plenty more here if you need more of these. Anybody need more? Here, just pass some of these back that direction if you would. The complementarian middle is this. Husband as head, wife as helper, working together as God has planned it. And then you have the extremes on either side. The far left column he titles the effeminate left. This is the kind of feminist agenda that has taken over and run everything. On the far right column, he calls this the violent right. So let's take a look at what is going on here. So the very top column with no boxes, the middle says emphasizing both equality and differences between men and women. So we're getting this right. So there's equality in importance, equality in value, but differences in roles. If we have a male dominance world, we have overemphasizing the differences between men and women. And then the far right, might makes right. So man just runs the show. Go the other direction, removing or denying many differences between men and women. Far left, all is one. Now let's see how this kind of plays out. God, we'll skip that one. Let's go to man, woman, the second column down, second row down, middle column. Husband, wife, equal value, different roles. That's what we've been talking about. If we go to the left direction, no gender-based role differences in marriage, no Mars-Venus differences. Far left, emasculation of men, defeminization of women. You should be able to kind of see, okay, I see what this means. I see how this plays out in culture. And you can see how these things go. But if you go the other direction, men are better than women, excessive competitiveness to show women as inferior, men as brutes, women as objects, dehumanization of women. And you can see this in cultures where women are, well, Sharia law kind of stuff. And I don't want to just pick on Muslims, but you kind of see this kind of going on, where women are just mere objects and men call all the shots. It's not right either. So let's go down to how children are, well, how about marriage then? Next column, next row down. Husband, loving, humble headship. Wife, intelligent, joyful submission to husband. Hear how Grudem describes that. So it's not a doormat. This is intelligent, joyful submission, and the husband is loving, humble leadership. That's how it should work. That's the ideal. It's a beautiful thing. What about when it's getting wrong? Third column, egalitarian column. Mutual submission. Often, husband as wimp, wife as usurper. Because we're trying to be, no one's in charge. Third column over, or the far left column, same-sex marriage is approved, because there's no difference. See? What does it matter? Yeah.
Would you say this current idea marriage is 50-50? Is that just egalitarianism?
That's egalitarianism. Now, is marriage a 50-50 investment? Well, it's really 100% investment, really. And we both have to be invested. But the idea of we're both sharing responsibilities, we're both in charge, no. You see, I think that's wrong. And this is real popular. I've heard pastors saying, you stand here as equals with equal responsibility. That's not quite true. Husband's got more responsibility in some things than the wife has responsibility in other things. They're different. That's the beauty of it. All right, good. We'll go the other direction. Husband is harsh, selfish, dictator. Wife is doormat. All the way over, polygamy, harems, female infanticide. So you get how this kind of plays out. Let's go down to the sex column. This is interesting. In the middle, we have monogamous, equally fulfilling intercourse as deepest expression of a great mystery, equality, differences, and unity, delight in God's plan for sexual expression, restrained by bonds of lifelong marriage. Male dominance, pornography, lust, adultery, and excessive attention to sex. And then violent right, you got violence against women, rape, violent opposition to God's plan for sex. Go the other way. Men become unmasculine, unattracted to women. Women become unfeminine, unattractive to men. Ambivalence towards sex. Then all the way over homosexuality, lesbianism. You kind of see how these things are kind of playing out. And it works in so many ways. Authority row, down on the bottom page. When you're having the kind of equality and differences right, authority is exercised within boundaries. But if you're going male dominance, overuse of authority. The violent right, abuse of authority. Other direction, suspicion of authority. And then the left column, hatred of authority. And you see this too. Why do you hate authority? Well, that's structure. That's order. Don't want it. And so any kind of authority seems to be suspect. And you get this from the kind of eco-feminists, or this, you hear the people talking about. Any kind of male is suspect. Any authority is bad. And you see this in the bumper stickers, you know, question authority. I'll digress there. It's just always amazing to me how the stereotypes are so lived out, you know. I tell my kids, stereotypes exist for a reason. They don't just get made up. But you see the bumper stickers, you know, the question authority, and all the kind of left propaganda bumper stickers, and you think, I wonder who's driving. And you pull up alongside, and you look at the driver and think, I knew it, you know. I'm sorry. I know we shouldn't be, you know, racial profiling or stereotype of profiling or whatever it is, but man, you just see it. All right, property column, or row. Laws protect private property and care for poor. More work and skill earns more wealth. Equal opportunity for all. Other side, women can't own property. Far the way over, slavery, dehumanization of the poor. Going the other direction, to the left. No one is allowed to be very rich. Large-scale dependence on welfare state government. Far the way over, no private property. All possessions equalized. And, you know, all this gets to be, you can kind of overplay this, but you get how this thing is working. Let's go back up to the family responsibilities. Our last one we'll look at, top page. And this is a good one because it kind of really brings things to a head. The middle column, husband, responsible to lead, provide for, protect. Wife, responsible to help husband by managing household, nurturing children. This is how God has designed this thing. If we go to male dominance, wives forbidden to have own job outside home or to vote or own property. That's wrong. No one's encouraging that. All the way over, men have all power, women and children are there to serve him. That's not the way it should be. Going the other direction, though. All responsibilities shared equally between husband and wife or divided according to gifts and interests. So we just kind of whatever you want to do because we're all the same. That's not the best. All the way over, no family, just society. And this is exactly what the communist societies are looking for, what they want. I mentioned that last week. You know, we don't want to have family because families just get in the way. Now, the point of this chart from Grudem is it helps you begin to realize the implications of getting this wrong are not just marriages that suffer. It starts to infiltrate all over the place, and all of society is touched by this, which is kind of the proof of this whole idea that I've been stressing, that the reason God established the order of creation is for the sake of the creation. And when the marriage is messed up, all of creation is messed up. So this matters. It matters. This is why in our congregations we've got to teach our people about God's plan for marriage. Because if they get it wrong, they suffer. Their children suffer. The congregation suffers. All of society suffers for it. It's just the reality, people. Everything is all intertwined here. And so you can't just kind of say, well, it's not a big issue. It is a big issue. And the implications just spread out all over the place. So, in our culture, where are we in the left, our 5 columns here? Well, we can debate it, but I would make a pretty strong case that we're clearly at least in the second to left column, if not even going over even further in some things. People would say, yeah, but see, in the old days, we were in the far right column. Maybe. But we're not now. And we need to deal with the reality of where we are now. And we can't act like that's still the battle. It's amazing to me when I hear feminist proponents who will talk about our male society. What are they talking about? What are they talking about? The men in our society have been made into, they've been emasculated. You can't be a man anymore because, well, that's offensive. Just shut up and be a wimp. And that's what's being enforced on us. And so we're making enormous strides. The feminist agenda has been, as I've said before, really, really successful. All right, now a couple of examples of where you see the kind of the implications of this going, and I believe these are tied into this, is first, an example of the feminist agenda really going is the whole abortion thing. Why is abortion so important to a feminist agenda? It's not just an issue of a woman's right. Really, what's really important here is abortion allows the woman no longer to be saddled but to this baby. And that sounds really harsh, but that's the reality, guys. Because if a woman is going to be equal to a man, she can't have this nasty thing called a womb that's going to tie her down to a kid for 9 months, being pregnant, and then have a baby afterwards. So the ultimate freedom is to get rid of the kid. So abortion is absolutely critical. So a lot of the writers who are kind of politically savvy and very critical of the kind of feminist movement would call abortion the holy grail of the feminist movement, and it really is. So they're not just fighting for my rights to choose, it's fighting for the ability to have the freedom to be like a man, to have sex without any consequences. That's really what it's coming down to. Well,
sadly, there's a great deal of consequence to abortions and that kind of...
Oh, I know. And women are absolutely the victims of it. They pay an enormous price. And the guilt, and even in the botched abortions and the kind of sloppiness that goes on. We never hear about this. But the statistics are astounding. The kind of the pain that gets caused by this. Post-traumatic stress, the post-trauma of abortions, it's enormous. And it's just so underreported because it's against the agenda. You see, it undermines the agenda. They don't want to talk about that because it undermines the agenda. Now, so abortion is a huge issue. It goes hand in hand, and you can begin to see why. And I'm not just trying to pick on this, it's just the reality. Here's the other agenda. This is even more sensitive. It's daycare. And I know this one's, whoa, wait a minute, you're stepping on some, a little close to home here. But let's be honest. What's the big motivation of daycare? Both got to work. And so if a woman is going to work so she can be equal to a man and be able to do her career, what's she going to have to do? Got to have somewhere for these kids to go. And so daycare becomes absolutely necessary, which is one of the reasons why daycare is such a key component of a feminist agenda. Daycare, daycare, daycare. Government run. You know, this is a right. The right to daycare, which just sounds really weird. But when you think about it, because they want the woman to be able to be equal to a man, well, she can't be tied to those kids, so get them out in daycare. And so in other words, and you can, I'll be just upfront about this, I think the church needs to be much more kind of ambivalent or even more cautious about our embrace of daycare. And I know a lot of churches have said, well, this is a great outreach tool. Oh, man, I suppose if you're outreaching to pagans, but, you know, maybe we should have a rule that no one in the church can use it. Because I'm half serious about that. No, more than half serious. Daycare is not a real good thing. Let's be honest. And, you know, kids should be raised by their parents. That's what parents are for. It's how God planned it. Not having someone else raising the kids. And statistics and everything all go with that too. And that's another one of the things that's just underreported. The real damage that goes to daycare kids and all this kind of stuff. And Rhodes, actually, this is the guy, you know, taking sex differences seriously, has a long section about daycare and his stuff, talking about how important that is to the feminist agenda and how statistics just don't support daycare being a good thing. But why don't they report it? Well, because most of the people reporting on it have their kids in daycare. I mean, let's be honest.
With our president we have now, he would, under what you're talking about, he wants to provide monies for daycare and such. It's kind of like he's coming across maybe unmasculine or emasculine.
Well, I would say he is definitely pushing a feminist agenda. He's part of that because he has adopted an egalitarian view of the world. He sees this as being the best thing, and he likes it, and so he's pushing for that. How he justifies that with his Christian faith, I don't know. You know, I'd love to have a conversation to say, what are you doing? How do you work this all out? I am suspicious of the moves he would make because I've heard him made by other people who claim to follow Christ. And what it comes down to is an antinomian kind of a gospel reductionist move. This is all in the name of love, and this is the moving things forward. This is what God wants, and that's kind of how they make these moves. But to do that, you've just got to run roughshod over the law and over the natural law. And when you start running roughshod over the natural law, you're always on precarious ground because the natural law is unforgiving. It will always take its toll. Always. All right. So what is kind of going on here then, and this is the real bottom line, is that there is, as a part of this feminist egalitarian move of undermining the structure, is a sort of an anti-mother thing. Because being a mother is one of the things that, you know, just kills all the options. And Rhodes gets into this as well, too, talking about how some of these, it's really fascinating how some of these champions of the feminist movement have decided they want to be a mom and give it up and go home and be a mom, and they write about how happy they are being a mother. And how does the left respond to that? Oh, it's great, you're choosing what you want to do. No. They vilify them as being a sellout and betraying the cause and turning their back on their sisters who have worked so hard. And it's just they have nothing but contempt for them, which is fascinating. Now, what's interesting is this whole thing on this kind of this motherhood and how important it is, because this is one of the key things that God has built into woman, is this desire to nurture and to have children and to raise children. And I would argue this is just part of the natural law. It's the way women have been wired. And so this is why often for a woman it's just so fulfilling. But our culture has not allowed this. Our culture has been teaching our young girls for decades now, you need to be successful, you need to use your gifts, and being a mom isn't enough. This is what our culture teaches us. And I have had students in my class, young women, who will say, this is so incredible to hear this being taught, that it's okay to be a mom and to be a wife, because there's nothing more that I've wanted all my life than to be a wife and to be a mom. That's all I want to do. But I have been told since I was a little girl that you're smart, you've got to do more. You're smart, you've got to do more. And I've been pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed on a career track, and all I want to do is get married and have kids. That's all I want to do. And I have been told that if I would do that, I would be betraying my gifts and turning my back on my abilities and not being a very good woman. And I would argue it's exactly the opposite. Because to be a mom and to be an awesome mom and to be an awesome wife is no easy thing. And you guys know this better than I. It's not an easy thing, and it is one of the greatest things we can do. So when we start talking about vocation, and I talked about this last week, one of the most important vocations in the entire world is the vocation of parent. Dads taking seriously their responsibility to be a dad, providing direction and discipline and decision making, and moms caring for children. It's not easy. It means sometimes cutting back on your luxuries and your gotta-have-its and you have to have two incomes. Well, maybe you have to rethink that, because maybe the vocation we should be pursuing is not my career at the workplace, but maybe my career at home, raising these children, this next generation, because that's something really sacred and really holy. I think in the church we need to do a better job of talking about that and have a little more courage to be willing to say that to people and to challenge them on what is God's best for you. What does this mean? Now, the feminist agenda then has been exceedingly successful in our culture, has made huge inroads, and is just calling so many shots now. You see it all over the place. Just so many attitudes, so many things going on. Has it influenced the church? Yes, absolutely. And see, now we're back to the whole thing on the CTCR. And why is it, the question was asked, that the CTCR would say that this applies in the church and in the home, but not in the wider society? It's because it's uncomfortable. And because we don't want to come across looking like we're trying to force people into, roles or something. We don't want to look like we're old-fashioned. And it's just uncomfortable. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to have that kind of thing. And I would also contend it's partly because of an influence of the feminist push coming even in our church body, with people with the feminist agenda who are running the show, making decisions, and having influence. And we're trying to appease everything and make it all happy. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. And we need to be a little more willing to say, wait a minute. If God has a standard and it's right, shouldn't we be following that in all areas?
Well, I think it's really hard because I know a lot of seminarians that their wives have to work.
Yes.
And then they have these little, we have one in our church.
I know.
His wife works so that he can go to seminary.
Yes.
So you have all these pastors you're training.
Now,
so it's your fault.
I know. This is... not now. I'll take that seriously. No. You're right on the money. Now, a couple thoughts on that. The one thought is you're quite true. Grudem actually addresses this in his little essay. He says, we create this often where guys are going to school and their wives are supporting them, and we're kind of working backwards on things. Now, that can be a really bad thing, but it's also not all bad, because frequently what happens is the people going through that experience realize how really bad it is. And I have had my students tell me all kinds of times, I hate this setup. My wife hates this setup, but it's kind of what we got to do here for the next 2 or 3 years. Don't like it, but we're doing it for a while. Understanding it's a temporary thing. And now, see, this gets also to this whole thing about how do you apply this? You don't apply it with an iron fist. You apply it with some flexibility. So the guy needs to go to school full time, and grad school demands a lot of time, so the wife is going to work for a while. All right, we'll do this. Understanding this is an exception and it's going to create some tension, and I guarantee you it will. You're going to have all kinds of tensions in that home for that time period, and my students attest to this. You probably look around, see a few heads going, some of them are here. And so it creates some difficult tensions for a while, but we realize it's for a while, and we're going to get past it. I think that's important, realizing the temporariness of it.
So I want to make sure you're not suggesting that women working or daycare are sins.
No, I'm not saying that. But I am saying is maybe we should rethink what is the best, and why are we doing this? Why does the woman think she has to work? Is it so she can be fulfilled? Well, we need to do some rethinking there. Is it so that she can get out of the house? We need to think about what's going on in the house. How's the husband failing her to make the house such an unpleasant place? This kind of thing. I'm serious. It's an attitudinal thing. And this gets into my next big point I really want to stress, and I'm going to try to save some time for questions at the end here. What are we teaching our kids? You see, if we're going to take this seriously, this needs to start with the kids. We need to be teaching our young boys what it means to be a man. Not to be Mr. Sensitive, but to be a man. Chivalry. Holding doors open for women. Letting women go first. Sacrificing. I'm trying to, all the time, he's not here, but teaching my son that it's okay to defer to your sisters. He says, it's not fair. I said, you're the man. You know, he don't like it. But I want him to learn that. You know, the women, yeah, you do defer. But that's not fair. You're the man. It's your job. When the Titanic went down, what did they say? Women and children first. When the ship, even when that plane hit the Hudson, what did they say? Women and children first, which was heartening. You see, that's a chivalrous idea. Feminists cringe when they hear that. What do you mean? Women, we're the same. I'll protect you. No, I don't want you protecting me. I'm a guy. Leave me alone. I'll go down with the ship, you know? I just read a really interesting article. It was in BBC's website, saying that a lot of the men who died in the Titanic were British nobility or British men because they were being chivalrous. They got their women and their children in the lifeboats. Then they went to the back of the ship, had a cigar, and talked to their friends while the ship went down because there was no room for them. But that was okay. That's what you do. We're British. You know, stiff upper lip, we do the chivalrous thing. And that's what they were taught. Now, we need to be teaching that to our boys too. You're a man. This means you take the hard thing, you take the bullet, you do this thing. This is your job. We need to teach this. And what do our girls need to be learning? Our girls need to be encouraged to be a mom and to be a homemaker. Not a bad thing. It's not demeaning. This is noble stuff. And we should be encouraging this. We should be, see, if we want to get serious about teaching God's idea of vocation, we should be implanting in our children the vision of a Christian marriage, where a husband is being a husband and a wife is being a wife according to God's plan. We should be giving them that vision so they're striving for that and looking forward to that so they will embrace it and live it themselves. Because you think of the enormous benefits to their children and their children and their children. And I see, I'm living testimony of coming from a long line of these families done right. It's a cool thing. And I know I'm in a privileged position, but we can all have this. Your kids can all have this. You just have to decide, I'm going to do it God's way. And start doing it now. And then the future generations reap enormous rewards from this. You can't just look at somebody who's, well, you've got it so easy. Well, maybe there's reasons why. They've worked hard at this. You can have it too.
So it means that you don't provide safe-sex protection for children. Right.
You don't what?
You don't provide safe-sex protection for your children. To say, okay, let's go, honey, and get birth control pills. Right. Or those types of things.
No, agreed.
I mean, I watch television all the time, and it's, you got 13-year-olds advertising for cervical cancer,
Yeah, right.
you know,
Yeah.
vaccination. And you can only get that if you have sex.
Right.
So what does that mean?
Right.
I mean, so the whole thing is all just...
No, you're quite right. And so this is it's just another illustration of it's not easy being a Christian in our society. It's not easy. And if it is easy, you're probably not doing it right. And I mean that. You know, we've gotten way too comfortable in our culture. And when American Christians want to just kind of blend in, they're just kidding themselves. Because our culture is not a Christian culture. It is a culture opposed to God's ways. And if we're going to be serious about doing things God's ways, we're going to stand out. And we're going to take some flack. And we need to be willing to do that.
He said clothes.
Clothing, oh man. You know, the whole thing on modesty, absolutely. There's another huge one that, you know, we need to be teaching our young girls especially. Well, guys too, they're hanging their down pants. That just kills me. I just laugh out loud when I see these guys fighting to keep their pants up. It's like, you idiot, put a belt on. Give me a break. You know? What is the deal? But anyway, no, modesty, seriously. You know, it's appalling to think that parents allow their children out the door the way they let their kids look. You know, what are you trying to teach your kids? What impression are you giving them about yourself and about the goal in life and about what it means to honor God? So many things here. All right. I'll open it to questions. I still have things on my list, but I want to make sure I address your questions, and we're down to the last 20 minutes or less. Go.
I have friends who are Christians who say I'm not fulfilled as just being a mother. I need to work.
That's what they say to you.
They say that to me, and I don't really know how to respond.
I think you might say, that's great if you have gifts that you can use, and you're able to use those while you're still fulfilling your other responsibilities. So, you know, you need to do that. But I think you need to challenge them and say, what do you find not fulfilling about raising children for God? why is that not fulfilling? And maybe as you talk with them, you'll help them to realize perhaps they have actually bought into some of the propaganda of the world around them that, you know, if you really want to make a difference, you've got to do something out there in the real world and bring home a paycheck because that validates yourself. And you need to help them realize, no, so often what's most validating isn't the paycheck at all. And I would just be willing to talk it through with them a little bit, say, why do you think that? I'd ask the question, why do you think that? And it was because I think most of the time people say that and it's just like, okay, yeah, we all accept that. Instead of, wait a minute, why? Why do you think that? I'd be really curious to have a conversation with them and find out why. Okay, good question. Yeah.
Educational system. I mean, I've worked in Lutheran high schools for 8 years, and it is kind of scary to see how pushed our girls are, ramrodded, I'd call it, and then how
into
just into everything. You got to be in a sport. You got to be top of your class. You got to be this.
Yep.
All of that. But then also the guys don't cause trouble.
Okay.
I guess my point and my question is, what do we do in these church institutions like a school, where we need to readdress some of this stuff, but I mean, where does that start?
Well, education is another huge issue, which I didn't get into. One of the guys in the bibliography, Leonard Sachs, his whole book is written from a standpoint of the differences, and especially the implications for education. He is a huge advocate of same-sex education. And I'm increasingly seeing the importance of that all the time. And see, this is another kind of the feminist, we want, you know, co-ed, everything's co-ed, because they're all the same. But co-ed education is just not a good idea, especially starting out at about 7th grade and on. Not good for all kinds of reasons. Because men end up being obsessed with the girls and not wanting to look stupid in front of the girls, and the girls are all interested in just kind of impressing the guys, and they don't learn as well because women learn differently than men anyway. That's just a fundamental thing brain-wise. Men learn math differently than girls learn math. Men learn science differently than girls learn science. It's just different, with different learning styles. So it's better to keep all the guys together and all the girls together. This has a lot to do even with confirmation instruction. I think same-sex confirmation education is a really good idea. And I think same-sex education all the way through even, you know, just high schools is a really good idea. It was pointed out that if you have an all-boys school and if you have a band, who's going to play the flute? You know? And so guys are free to do things like being in choirs and things like that. Whereas in a co-ed school, no guy's going to be in choir. That's for the gay guys. You know, you have all these stereotypes that go with this, you know. And guys are discouraged from actually pursuing some of the gifts they've got. And the same-sex education allows you to pursue your gifts more fully and to do what you want to do. See, this is the point. And this is what Rhodes says. Rhodes is not even a Christian, but he is a huge advocate of do what you've been wired to do. And if you're really good at nurturing, go for it. And if you're really good at leading, go for it. See, he says he really criticizes Title IX. Title IX, you know, with equal women and equal school, because he says the difference is profound. Guys need competition just to get an outlet for their competitive spirit. And so they need to have a chance to do sports. Women are doing it for different reasons. And to cut men's sports so that we can have an equal number of girls, it's great that women can have this opportunity, but you're hurting the guys like crazy because the very thing they need, you're taking away from them. And so, you know, a lot of our social policy even is just wrong-headed because it's based on wrong ideas. So I would say in your situation, start talking, you know, maybe float the idea. Maybe we should do some same-sex stuff once in a while. What would happen if we tried that? And you're probably going to get a bunch of flack and resistance, but I think it would be a good thing to consider. And then also, just teaching those guys, start teaching maybe some intentionality about what's it mean to be chivalrous. What's it mean to be a guy? Are we all the same? Do men have different responsibility? Let's talk about that. Where does that come from and why? And start doing some educating about that. I think that'd be good. All right, good? Anything else? Other questions? Yep.
Question about the association of right and left as individuals, mixing together, and one going into the other. Dirty, yes, when you get into the...
Doing what?
Getting dirty.
Oh, okay.
Going to the left. Yeah, that happens. We split it up at childhood in our church by causing two separate education systems. We separate ourselves from the world by putting our children in the right side and not let them associate with us. We also take the parents out of that mix too, so that education does not get the influence of Christianity that it should, because we're not there. We're not on the stage. So how do you do this mixing of the right and the left?
Yeah,
It has to start someplace.
I agree. I'm not sure if I would call it mixing, and I agree it has to start someplace. But you see, I'm also really concerned that children are educated to know the truth, to the right way. And so, yeah, but see, boy, if you have parents who are spending the morning and the evening with the kids, but the kid goes to 8 hours of school with a teacher, who's going to have a lot of influence on that kid's thinking? A teacher just has profound influence. It's just a reality. And we need to take that seriously. My personal opinion on this one is, I think absolutely the Christian have to be integrated to the world and have to be engaged in the world and be influencing the world all over the place. But I wouldn't say it starts with childhood, because I think children are way too malleable, and I have a responsibility to raise these children to be capable of handling it when they get there. So I want to equip them so that when they're ready, I'll throw them into the lion's den, but not until. So, and I don't think I would do that with a grade school kid or even a junior high kid or even, frankly, with a high school kid. College, maybe. But see, even there, I hesitate, because I've seen too many kids run off to college with their faith and come home as atheists or agnostics just because they got run through the buzzsaw by some, agnostic professor who ridiculed their faith.
Are we trusting the Holy Spirit when we take that out?
I'm trusting the reality of my responsibility as a parent and the Holy Spirit, both. But you see, I don't think kids are evangelism tools, and I would never do that.
And the kid didn't sign up to be a missionary.
What's that?
The kid didn't volunteer to be a missionary.
Correct. The kid did not volunteer to be a missionary, and I shouldn't put him in that role. I agree. I agree. Then the time comes, you prepare them, and then when they're ready, you bet.
You're a missionary when you're baptized.
Yes, in your appropriate field. In an appropriate field.
Always.
Yes, but see, to say, okay, son, you're going to go off now to this public school and they're going to teach you about Darwinism and they're going to teach you about feminism, they're going to teach you about the homosexuality being a good thing. Stand firm. Go for it, kid. You're going to do it. Some kids, maybe. Other kids,
Lord help.
Why do that to them?
Lord help.
Yeah, Lord help me, but you, and what does God say? Hi, here's the answer. You got other options. Don't throw them in there. No. This is not separating. This is being wise. Go ahead.
I think the bigger issue is when we pull our kids out of the Christian schools because they're not Christian enough. I had that happen to me as a high school teacher. Oh, this school isn't Christian enough.
Okay.
Well, then go to your principal and go, I'm a member of the association.
Let's do something about this.
Fix it.
Right.
No, I agree. All right. Other questions? If not, I have a couple more things. All right. Let's just mention the whole thing on gender-neutral language. And this is another part of this kind of the feminist agenda. We don't have chairmen anymore. We don't have firemen anymore. We don't even have stewardesses anymore or waitresses anymore. Now we have wait people. And we have, or servers. Servers gender neutral. And everything's all about gender neutral language. We try to find something else that's gender neutral. And some people say, it's just language, it doesn't matter. I don't buy it for a minute. Language is powerful. And the words you use matter. And so I'm just kind of throwing out a caution here. Don't be quite so quick to adopt, okay, new ways of talking. Fair enough, rose by another name still smells as sweet. But labels matter. And if they didn't matter, why are people so concerned about chairman? If it's just language, then why not just keep on calling everybody chairman or fireman? And people say, well, wait a minute, that's excluding women, and that's offensive. Well, then I think it's offensive when you take away the differences when there are obvious differences. And so, in other words, language matters, and we should be a little bit more willing to say, I'm not ready to kind of sell the farm here and let my language go yet. It's a weird sort of a thing, this kind of obsession we have in our country right now with this gender-neutral language, even forcing its way into academic writing where you have to use he/she, which is just stupid and makes for really lousy writing and reading. But this is kind of the way we've gotten into this, and I think it's a passing fad. I'm hoping it is, but don't be I guess I'm encouraging you, don't be quite so complicit and so, willing to kind of go along with that. Because there are differences in the language reflecting the differences God has made. And if men and women are fundamentally different, with different responsibilities and different roles within God's creation, even our language should appropriately and rightly reflect that. And it's not a bad thing. It's okay. Now, going with that also is the whole kind of the problem with kind of this putting women into roles where, I'll say it, they really don't belong, like being a soldier on the front line. She doesn't belong there, period. And you say, wait a minute, that's just really chauvinistic. I guess so. I'll let the label stand. But see, that's not her job. She's not the protector. She's not the one who's supposed to be looking out for everybody else. That's the husband's job. That's the man's job. So men are to be the soldiers, period. And not girls, not women. And see, this even gets into things like firemen, and so we have, well, women can do that too. Yeah, but can they? And it's a weird thing that they have physical standards for all this stuff, and they are different. We all know it, and we all act like it's okay. But when there's actually a fire, and there's a fireman coming in to pull me out of the 3rd floor, I don't want to see a 150-pound woman standing there saying, come on, hop on, let's go. No thanks. Who's carrying who here? I want Todd McMurray, one of our vicars out there who's, a famous former firefighter before he came to SEM. He could carry me and another guy out. That's what I want.
By the same token, do men belong in nursing?
Again, I would say, do they belong there? Can they do that job? Sure. So I'm not trying to say the stereotypes have to be enforced, okay? And don't hear me saying that. But I'm saying there are certain things that you have to ask the question, why are you pushing into that? Now, can a woman who's interested in firefighting be involved in some way without, being kind of the front line going into the buildings? I think so. And it's just like, you had the WACs in the World War II and stuff. Now, can a guy do this nursing thing? Maybe he's interested in medicine, but he doesn't have the wherewithal to go to med school. Fine. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah.
But I don't think it's chauvinistic. I think it's chivalry.
That's where I'm coming from.
You're under the you're protecting what you should be protecting. Right. And not allowing somebody to be on board a destroyer and be up against men in a close, confined area.
That's another problem, right? Yeah, that's another problem. All right, good. Final questions. Yes?
I got a bunch of them. We have to quit and come back to talk to you after the class.
I'll give you a few minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. First one, you mentioned the sword being there, etc. When the angel held the sword at the Garden of Eden, would that be kind of the first institution of the sword of the left-hand kingdom, the prohibition?
Probably.
Because it just jumped out at me. Of course, at the end of time, the sword will be withdrawn, and we'll be able to have it and get back to the tree of life, etc. in Revelation. Okay. Such things as cards and dancing, laws in churches. It used to be you couldn't play cards, you couldn't dance, and different other things. What was the...
Well, we have to ask the question...
That was kind of stupid things.
Well, you have to ask the question, why?
And so,
what's the concern? What are we trying to protect? And is it a good thing? Is it valid? Is it worthwhile or not?
It was carried way too beyond.
Probably so, sure.
You can play dartboard, but you couldn't play cards or dance or anything, this type of thing.
No, yeah, and see, we don't need to be pietistic about this, and we're not trying to get closer to God by our behavior. My goal is to say, what is God's will? What does it mean to be conforming to it? That's the challenge. And are there some behaviors that are not helpful? Yeah, probably, sure. And we need to take a little more seriously, what impact does this behavior have on the child, his thinking, on me and my behavior, what I'm doing? I think it's worth asking. Now, so, maybe I don't have a big problem with card playing or dancing, well, even though some dancing probably I do have a problem with it. But I probably have a bigger problem nowadays with the kind of movies people go and see. I'll admit that readily. Why bother go seeing a movie that's glorifying what's immoral? Why would you do that?
You said you would apply laws, etc., in terms of etc. That sounds like getting hypocritical where people would obey laws but would do everything in the world to get away from them, etc. So
that might be.
So it's almost like you were encouraging hypocrisy. Obey the law, but and there's almost too much of that in some ways already. So
sometimes a little hypocrisy is a really good thing. No, I don't have a problem with that. Because if the person who says, I really don't feel like, taking care of I don't really feel like being kind to my wife today, but I'll do it because I have to. See, is he being hypocritical? Probably. Because his heart's not in it. He's saying one thing, but he really feels something else altogether. He says, sure, I'll do that for you, honey. Is he doing the right thing? Yeah. And I'll take that. He needs to do it. And so there's a place for that. Now, hypocrisy becomes a really negative thing when you start playing the game and the facade, and that can be a very negative thing. I understand that, and our Lord warned against that. But there's a place for a little bit of it.
Kind of the whitewashed sepulchres.
Sure.
Yeah. Historical. Let's get someone else to.
Go ahead. One more.
One more, and then let someone else. You mentioned historically that people were married by the justice of the peace of the church.
In Luther's day
when
in Germany.
When did they start church marriages? What historical wise?
I don't know. I haven't looked into that.
That really.
It probably came pretty quick after that.
That's a new one to me. Okay,
yeah.
Someone else to call on.
Yeah, Bob.
I think I'm speaking for the group.
No, don't do that.
I thoroughly enjoy your presentation and what abilities you have, and continue the good work. And thank you very much.
I'll do my best. Thank you. All right. Now I've got to stop after that.
Well, I was going to say something about that too. There were a number of times you said, I will get to this question, and we never got to it. Can we meet next Monday?
No. All right. Keep studying and keep learning. There's so much to learn about God's truth. We're just scratching the surface here, so I hope you keep your appetite is just whetted a little bit here, and you keep on going forward. Blessings on your continuing service in God's kingdom.